welcome to Bringing Inanimated 3D Objects to Life with me, Jerusha Graham. I'm the museum coordinator for the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking. And this presentation is part of Fast Film Fest 2022. The museum sponsors Fast Film Fest in partnership with Georgia Tech Library and ASIFA South. And the festival is a festival of stop motion animation. So we encourage creation of original animated films that are no longer than 5 minutes long, made with paper as the primary medium. And it's free for people to participate in. And then the videos get shared with the world via our website and YouTube channel. This year's theme is Press Start. And today I'm going to give some tips on creating performances with three-dimensional objects. You can do stop motion with 3D objects. This example here on the right is a two-dimensional animation, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that get created for Fast Film Fest. Jumping right in, we start talking about performing with 3D objects. There's object theater, or object puppetry. And object theater, as defined by the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, is theater that explores the inherent movement in or physical properties of everyday objects to use as characters or symbols in a story. So here I have an example of a performance by The Blue Table. You can see she's chosen to use a everyday plastic bag, and she's starting to create form for the object using a little rubber band. And it really encourages the audience to use their imagination. So you can see that that plastic bag has become a duck. So this genre was made popular in the 1980s, even though it's rooted in older practices of performance. So you get the idea. And then there's what our purpose is today, which is the stop motion animation, three-dimensional, manipulating three-dimensional objects for stop motion. All right, and this animation is called stems. Anyway, you may be able to search it and actually get the beauty of the sound as well. So this was a collaboration between Ansley Henderson and Poppy Ackroyd. And it's called stems because Poppy, who's a composer, sent Ansley stems, individual music stems that he then created characters for. And here we get to see the each of the characters actually come to life as he constructs them, and they start to play the music that Poppy composed. You can see that these little characters, they have a lot of heart. You know, they really do come to life right in front of us. We recognize, you know, the emotions even in simple gestures and movements. Okay. So stop motion, if you haven't seen or created stop motion before captures movement through a combination of many images, one frame at a time, and those still images are played back to create sequence. And that brings us to 12 principles of animation. So these principles were developed, where are my notes? These principles were developed by two Disney animators, I should say outlined. They were developed earlier on in Disney's history, but they were outlined by two Disney animators, Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, in a book published in 1981 titled The Illusion of Life Disney Animation. And even though we're talking about 3D performance today, these principles that were applied to 2D animation, many of them can also be applied to 3D animation. So the 12 principles: squash and stretch. This is the concept that we get a greater understanding of gravity and weight of the object based on squashing and stretching the object and in its response to gravity and to its own weight. In anticipation, the second of the 12 principles, tells us that we can't just have action happen. We have to set the audience up for so that they anticipate that action. So in the illustration here by Samantha Lucy Studio, this poster can be found on Etsy shop. In the top right hand corner there, we see her little bear character lifting up the watermelon in anticipation of the action of it coming back down and throwing it down. There's also staging. We want to be mindful of where we're bringing attention to the audience attention, making sure that every aspect that's captured in the image is moving the story or emotion that you're trying to communicate forward without creating distractions. The straight ahead action and pose to pose is less of a concern with stop motion. Stop motion is straight ahead action. We're doing one movement, capturing it, doing the next movement that follows it, capturing that, and so on. Versus the pose to pose. So in 2D animation, you can draw like we see that anticipation image. We can draw where the image starts, we can draw where the image ends, and then fill in the blanks between those 2 points. So stop motion is going to automatically use the straight ahead action. And then follow through. When you have multiple parts to an object, not all of them are going to move at the same rate. So the larger kind of main body mass starts to move. And then if you have appendages or accessories, tail, hat, ears, arm swing, these kinds of things, they're going to move at a different rate, a slower rate than the main mass that initiates the action. So they're going to trail behind in motion, in starting their motion, and also they'll stop later than the main object. Slow in and slow out. As you're manipulating your objects, we want to allow the audience time to capture and understand the movement. This is also kind of related to anticipation. We don't move at the same rate. We enter into our movement slowly, then we gain speed, and then that momentum is slowed down as we come out of an action. Think of it like driving a car. We don't peel out, we start slowly, get up to speed, and then as we come to a stoplight or stop sign, we slow down. And then arcing. Living creatures in nature move in arcs. Rarely will you see very sharp, angular um, uh, kinds of motions in nature. So if you're trying to bring something to life and give it that sense of vitality, we want to think about its motions, its movements, and they'll be more believable if we move things using arcs versus straight angular lines. Secondary action. If I want to make something walk across the screen, I can just push the main mass of the object across the screen, but it's going to be more interesting and again more believable if we have a few secondary actions. So as I'm walking, I might, or my object is walking, I might have the arms swing or a head to turn slightly and then back on path. These are secondary actions. The primary action is the walking, the legs moving or whatever is motoring it across. And the secondary actions are, would be head nod or turn or wave. Those are secondary actions. And then timing. We don't want everything to be paced the same. So some things are going to move, points of action are going to move faster than others. And so being mindful of that timing and what is believable in terms of the speed in which things are moving in the pacing and spacing. Exaggeration. So with animation, we're going to really read the emotion and the kind of intention of the movements. If they're exaggerated, if the expressions are exaggerated, if the movements are exaggerated, it's easier for the audience to read. Solid drawing doesn't apply to our conversation of 3D. And then appeal, trying to create aspects of your characters that will connect to the audience. Even if you have villains, there's got to be something about the character, the way the character is presented, that the audience can connect to. So some aspects of object performance. We have weight, breath, and focus. And you can see that there's some overlap between the principles of animation and these aspects. Here with the weight, that's that squash and stretch concept that we saw discussing animation principles. As you're performing with 3D objects, if your object is supposed to be very big and heavy, you can't move it, have it move super quick. It's going to move a little bit more slowly. If it lands on something, then we should see some of that squash happening to the thing that's landing on because it's heavy. The aspect of breath. So we want to bring life to our objects. We want there to be a subtle motion that kind of implies an inhaling and exhaling that our bodies naturally do as we breathe. And as a puppeteer or performer who is creating the motion through these objects, you first want to have your object match your breathing, inhaling and exhaling slowly, right? And then we want to consider what kind of breathing would be required to tell the story or the emotion, to emote what's happening. So if your object gets a sudden scare or surprise, that breathing is going to increase and then slow down. as the character calms back down. And then focus. Um, just like with the principle of staging for animation, focus, we want to be mindful of guiding the audience's focus. So as the puppeteer of the object, your focus should be locked onto the object that you're moving around. And then as you move your object, how you move your object, and how you choose to uh, decorate your object is going to help the audience understand, what is the forward-facing aspect of your object. How are they seeing or searching out in the world? What's their front end and their back end? And then how are they navigating the space? Your movements will dictate whether the audience starts to see the world through the eye of the object that you've brought to life. And then there's Levon movement analysis. So this comes from studies of human movement, primarily for the purpose of dance. It was developed by Rudolf Levon, who's considered the father of European modern dance. And the definition of Levon movement analysis, as defined on the Levon Institute's website, is a method and language for describing, visualizing, interpreting, and documenting all varieties of human movement. So there's four main categories. There's the body. And so the body is what's moving and in what sequence, right? So if I'm moving my arm, the arm is a descriptor of multiple parts working together. It's not just the arm, right? I have my shoulder socket, I have the upper arm, the elbow, the lower portion of my arm, my wrist, my palm, and then the digits that are at the end of the palm, right? And just thinking about in what order do these items move. If I'm picking up something off of the table, am I moving the full arm, or am I just moving the lower arm, or just the wrist? These are things that we're taking into consideration. Then there's effort, and this reflects the attitude towards the movement. Am I moving kind of lazily to pick something up, or am I moving it with urgency? Effort ends up being broken down into 8 categories, and those 8 categories are defined by how 4 aspects are combined: direction or weight, speed, and flow. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. And then space, where the movement is traveling, up and down, forward and back, one side or the other. And these 3 factors help to determine shape, how the form changes and sculpts itself in the space. The modes of shape change involve flow, so is it expanding or condensing itself? Directional movements, is it spoking or arcing? And then its qualities, is it rising or sinking, advancing or retreating, those kinds of things. So the 8 efforts of movement within the Levon movement analysis are float, glide, dab, flick, slash, ring, press, and punch. And you can see on this chart how the 4 combination of the 4 aspects define each of these efforts. So floating, the direction is indirect. When you float, it's kind of drifting from one place to the other. The sense of weight is very light. The speed is sustained, slow and steady. And the flow is free versus punch, which is the exact opposite, where the direction is direct. It's going exactly from point A to point B, no variation. The weight of the action is heavy. The speed is quick, and it's a bound flow. There is tension in a punch versus floating, which is a free flow. Having some vague, and you don't have to have these memorized, but having some vague awareness of the Levon movements will help craft deeper, more meaningful movement of your character based on the intention and emotion that you're trying to elicit. And then I just threw in here the 12 basic art archetypes. So the other slides really dealt with, movement and understanding of movement for performance, whereas the 12 basic archetypes are ways that you can build in, again, a greater sense of appeal for your audience, because these archetypes exist throughout, many cultures, and for many years, people will be able to better grasp the purpose of the character in your story or performance, right? So these 12 archetypes, we have the outlaw, the magician, the hero, the lover, the jester, the everyman, the caregiver, the king or ruler, the creator, creative, the innocent, the sage or wise man, and the explorer. You don't have to use archetypes, but if you are telling a story, just know that these are some standard characters that will be familiar to audiences. All right. So I've been talking for a while. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen to allow you guys to see me playing with some of these objects. So let's explore some of these concepts, right? Coming back to our principles, I'm going to jump back to our aspects of object performance. So I have this paper bag here. Open it up. And many of us have probably in some point in childhood made paper puppet kind of thing. But we're talking about object performance today, so I'm not necessarily going to go with the paper puppet in that form, but just what can this structure do? What are the qualities of this structure? It's got a kind of great sound to it. I can crumple it a little bit, give it a more unique kind of profile if I want to. Just like in a video, pinch and prod and move things around just to see what they can do. Right? So if this was my object and I want to do a performance with this object for the purposes of stop motion. First, I want to have some sense of the action or story that I want to tell. In this case, I want this character to be kind of old and slow moving. Maybe just walking down the street, and enter in maybe, you know, young, let's see if I can hold this up for you guys to see a little better. A younger character that is like too anxious and ready to get down the street, but the old characters is in their way. You know, they're wanting to speed by, and we can have a couple. Oh, excuse me. A couple of the characters speeding, playing around, speeding by. Maybe these two are chasing one another, right? So the objects here are just, paper cups. Their coloring lend themselves to maybe being read as more youthful. And then because they are youthful, I'm going to be mindful of how I move them. These I might move with a little bit more pop and than I would this character here, who's an older character whose joints may be hurting them, those kinds of things, right? So let's start with our paper bag. In our aspects of object performance, we have, we want to give this character a breath, right? So we're going to start off by so this is a subtle movement. Now for stop motion, because I would be taking individual pictures, I would need to find a way to compress the bag and to release the bag to be able to take the pictures. So that compression and release for breath may involve a string. I could put a string that attaches to the top that I could pull so that this would indent a little bit. That compression may involve trying to pinch the character from the back side where you can't see my hand. And then, or whatever I'm holding this with, and taking the picture, and then releasing and taking the other picture and doing it a couple of times so that we get kind of right. So we have our breathing, and we want to provide focus for the audience. What is the front end of this and what is the back? Some of that may be determined by the direction in which I move the object. If one of these little kids runs by, how the object turns, maybe to see and follows their progression, right? All those help to create focus. And as if I'm doing an animation where I am also physically present in the scene, instead of kind of setting my image, getting out of the shot and photographing, if I'm physically in the scene, I want to make sure that my eyes as the performer are on what is being performed, not looking off to the other side, not looking at someone who may be behind the camera, but really focusing in on the object itself so that it shows that this living being here, who's over here breathing, deserves my attention. Right. And then a sense of weight. By nature, this paper bag is very lightweight. You just get kicked around. But we want this bag to be moving down the street, to feel like it's got a little bit more weight than something that can be easily blown away. So I'm giving a little kind of compression as I have this make each step. It's the embodiment of the kind of squash and stretch concept for helping to define the weight. And you guys have to I have to apologize because I, as a performer, would be on the bag, but I'm also trying to look at the camera to see if I'm capturing this clearly for you all to see. Going back to some of the concepts of Levon here, we were talking about the younger characters, these little paper cups here. Because I want them to read as younger, I'm moving them so that they have kind of quick, in terms of speed, movements. And the movement is actually a bound movement, that kind of popping up and down. There's tension behind that movement. It's not free flowing, even though the spirit of the characters are youthful and hyper. The actual movement has tension. There's unspent energy in these characters. Just to give you a sense. Now, if they were in conflict with one another, I might do slightly broader kinds of motions, like they're really kind of in competition with one another, versus the popping motion, which is, I'm so happy to be here with you. Aren't we having so much fun together? Motion. All right, and then just to reinforce kind of that sense of focus and direction, right? And also to encourage experimentation in terms of what's possible. Let's see if I have something I can poke a hole with. Well, that poked a slightly bigger hole than I intended. But I can also combine, maybe I'll do it that way. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to talk and actually construct at the same time. To combine objects to create objects with new meaning or characteristics. In this case, the little cup goes from being a little cup to maybe a mama cup and a baby cup together now. And I can, move mama's head around. I can give her greater sense of direction in terms of where she's looking. If I add, I can add a piece of paper or mark her face on the cup so that you know where the front of this character is that helps give us direction. Let's see. Oh, spin her head around. There we go. Right? It helps give us direction. We can see her kind of looking around. Where did that little scamp go to? You know. And right now I'm just rotating, but I can also tilt for a little bit more performance out of these simple objects. You can build, so that's one way of building here, twisting paper and taping. It's another way we can build characters and limbs. Like I can continue to add things to this. I kind of like how this movement happens, how me moving the lower half creates a wobble in the top portion of this structure, which is a great kind of thing to start to play with in terms of character and telling story, and who this might be versus this structure here. When we start talking about performance for specifically for stop motion, our challenge is to figure out ways to have items be able to stand and pose for the time that it takes to take the picture, so that you don't have your hands in the scene. So I might add a little wire to this to help it stand, or I might choose to secure the base, the feet, using blue tack or taping it directly. Some animators use boards that have holes, a grid of holes, so that they can screw characters or objects through to the board, and the board is the surface that everything is performed on. So there are a lot of aspects, but the main and the primary thing is to play, to allow yourself to play, to figure out what the characteristics of the material that you're performing with. So here I have a very stiff straw, versus when I flattened it and move it around a little bit. Now I have something that I can maybe do an inchworm kind of motion with. Let me just cut that out of the way so you guys can see. Right. Which is a very different movement from if I folded this with very angular. It's still inching along, but it's a stiffer kind of movement versus this guy who, I can twist up the ends. I can add, if I wanted to, a couple of extra humps. There's just a more fluid motion involved. And I can show you guys the magic of the blue tack here in helping. And this is just basically what some people may know as poster putty. So it can be used and repositioned. Right. I realize I'm almost off screen, but you can see that this will hold long enough for me to take the picture that I would need for animating. And then I can shift it a little bit closer and take another picture, so on and so forth. You really do have to play with your materials to see what they're willing to do. But the main primary thing is don't be afraid to play and really look to see what characteristics your objects lend themselves. I have this tissue box, which would be a great prop to maybe have just kind of sitting there. I can have things emerge out of the box, right? So I can have things perform so that they pop out, looking around. Over, trying to figure out where they are, how they get it, where they want to go, and then choosing to this is stretch, right? Oh, trying to get their balance. Whew. Maybe they need to sit down for a minute, right? So they're free now. They can walk off, or maybe, hey, this is a pretty good place to just kick my legs up, swing them around for a little bit, see what else happens while I'm sitting here. So it's great for that, where I have something climbing out of it, or you can have something mundane like this start to come to life, maybe change its orientation, and then figure out the story from there. Again, it's a great one to have things come out, but I could also add buttons or draw something here to create eyes, or glue something so that my object now becomes, let's see, I don't know if you guys can just see these because my fingers may be in the way. I'm trying to get things balanced. Looking at the camera is hard. But now the box looks surprised. Oh my gosh, I've come to life and the world is so amazing, right? The key is to allow your imagination to take over and really move these objects around to figure out what kind of story you can tell. Obviously, with the paper museums, I've been using paper examples, but any kind of object from your daily life. Here I have thread. I've got what is this? A knitting needle. I may want to do something with these, have these things come to life. Maybe the thread is fishing something out of this whole kind of a rescue situation. I will say that for object performance, if you're doing an animation with a three-dimensional object or any kind of animation, but specifically stop motion, it's a lot of fun to have a second set of hands. So maybe one person is keeping an eye on what things look like on the camera and helping to direct the the manipulator, puppeteer, right? So that the puppeteer's focus can really be on the puppet and trying to um, get really get the performance of the objects, whereas the camera person is focused on whether everything is in shot, you know. Dun, 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 dun. You know, I can figure out, how do I want this character to move? Are they suspicious? Are they moving kind of slow and then quick? Some kind of combination of slow and quick? Or are they um, feeling very free and safe in the space? Are they trying to make themselves small and unseen? Maybe hiding behind things? Um, these are the questions that we're asking. What is the motivation of the characters, the object? You know, what does the object lend itself? So I was talking about this as if it was a little kid hopping around. And, again, squishing and forming, see if something else can be formed. You know, maybe this is some kind of grump or helmet or hat or something to be an object that gets used by another object. So maybe this is a chair. All right, so I hope that that's gotten you excited about maybe pulling out some objects around the house and seeing what you can, what kind of performance you can make them achieve. And you know, again, you can choose to work on arranging things so that we don't see you as the performer in the story, or like the animation I showed earlier, the stems animation, where we did see some element of the maker's hand in the scene. Or you too can be a character that gets performed with your three-dimensional objects. When you use live action people for stop motion, it's called pixelation. And so if I was performing with this for stop motion purposes, I would do my first movement, then my next, and so on and so forth. So maybe I'm eventually going to actually touch this bag, and at which point the bag may then come to life or whatever. Or maybe I'm pointing at this and the bag is starting to realize that, hey, I'm pointing, what do you think you're doing? Kind of thing. The key is taking one image at a time in succession and combining those. If you've never done stop motion, we've got plenty of resources on paper.godtech.edu. Let's see, I can show you the link. And just to paper.godtech.edu, Fast Film Fest, right? Fast-film-fest here. And just to stress that this is part of Fast Film Fest 2022. You can get information about how to incorporate or how to use green screen and other tricks available, tools available on iMovie Basic with iMovie Basics the presentation given by Allison Volk. And you can hear great animators talking about the field, such as I'll Make Me a World, which was recorded earlier and will be available at paper.gatech.edu very soon. And A Career in Animation, Ask Anything with Vinod Krishnan, Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. Again, all of our presentations are recorded and shared both on the website and on the YouTube channel, the Paper Animation Film Fest YouTube channel. There's still time to submit. Submissions are due February 18th, 2022. And the jurors this year are Cassandra Bruton Johnson, Jaleesa Leva, and Jason Schwartz. All submissions will be available on our YouTube channel, and the submissions that are selected by the jurors will be screened at a watch party on March 4th. Okay. If you'd like to participate, you will find a registration form and a release form on our website. Both of those forms must be submitted for your films to be screened and posted by the Paper Museum. And again, there's a wealth of tutorials and the videos of previous year submissions on Paper Animation Film Fest YouTube channel. This is all free and open to the public. We hope that you'll join us for our watch party on Friday, March 4th. And you can also find information and a community of animators with the CIFA South. If you're not located in southern states of the United States of America, there are CIFA groups throughout the world. So we definitely encourage you to look up a CIFA. All of this programming is free, but if you would like to support the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking to be able to enable us to offer more free programming and more quality programming, please consider making a donation at mygeorgiatech.edu/giving/papermaking-museum. Thank you very much.